Present.
Commissioner Husnick?
Here.
Commissioner Lord?
Here.
I'll note for the record, Commissioner Grindal and Commissioner Hoyt are absent. Mayor Bain.
Here.
President Bain.
I would like to invite everyone to rise and join us for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Members of the EDA, we have an agenda before you. I will entertain a motion to approve or any changes.
I move we approve the agenda.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Oppose? And motion carries. Our next item this evening is election of officers. This is a continuation from an item that we had postponed from a previous agenda. And Abby, you just want to walk us through the officers that are that we're being asked to place tonight? Just kind of tee this up for us.
Sure. As I noted in the staff report, you have a governing resolution that makes up identifies the positions of president, vice president, secretary, treasurer, assistant treasurer. It does note in there the EDA shall elect a president, treasurer, and secretary every year. However, it's been your past practice to annually elect. A few things to note: the president and the vice president cannot be the same. The secretary, treasurer, and assistant treasurer may be held by the same commissioner, which makes that a little awkward, but those are the words in your governing resolution. And the offices of the secretary and assistant treasurer need not be held by a commissioner, meaning that you could appoint your staff to do those. So I included the bylaws in your packet. You should elect all 5 positions to serve their term to January 31st of 2025. We're a little delayed in this term. Staff's recommendation is the EDA move to elect all 5 positions, with at least the secretary position being held by city staff. I didn't note in my staff report, but it would also be appropriate to appoint city staff as the assistant treasurer, because I predominantly do help manage your finances.
Very good. Thank you, Abby. Just a quick note, with the recommendation for city staff to be secretary and assistant treasurer, I know you had, or with that recommendation, be a member of city staff. Did you have an individual in mind?
Oh, I would recommend myself. Why not?
Well, I would second that motion.
I don't think I can actually make the motion.
And I was, so just a point of note as I was reading through these, I was a little surprised that the treasurer position was not a city staff member. Would that be customary if I know we're not rewriting these today.
I do think that we should revisit it. I do think after reviewing all of our governing resolution and our bylaws, there's some conflict between them even. I think that it's definitely appropriate to review. I don't know what the statutory requirements are, but yes, I think that it's something that we should take a look at.
Also, something else that stood out as I was reviewing these, since that not being the case, there are areas where there are, I think by design, not necessarily direct alignment between the EDA and the city council. There are areas where there are, purely from a structure standpoint, there are work streams that are allowed for within the EDA that may or may not intersect with city council. And that's a structural thing based off of the structure of our EDA. We've tried to manage that in a very, what's good for the city is good for the city, and in a very cohesive, doing joint workshops and doing a lot to make sure that we have consensus and some common vision, common strategy between the EDA and the city council, but that's not required in structure. And so I just want to say, personally, because we have tried to have anything that's financial kind of land at the top level at council, just to make sure that everything is in alignment with what we're doing from a budgeting standpoint, what we're doing with our levy standpoint. Structurally, we don't have to have the treasurer be a city council member, but I think that makes sense. Again, just from my perspective of wanting alignment between the EDA and council. I think having that treasurer role be a city council member is not at all required, but I think would just make sense, but I'm wide open for feedback on that. Because it is just, and it's a role that is allowed for or required within our EDA, but just, again, wanting that alignment and wanting that financial responsibility to ultimately make sure that we've got everything kind of coming together within the city. I think that makes sense for that to be a city council member, but again, I'm wide open for feedback and feedback on any of these positions. Those are just a couple of things that stood out to me as I was reviewing the packet.
That makes sense to me.
Makes sense? Any other
I'm indifferent.
points? Indifferent? Okay. With that, we can just open it up for nominations. I'm happy to entertain nominations or further discussion, whatever is the preference of the EDA tonight.
Considered the president at this time, since you're the chairperson then of the EDA. Would that fit your profile?
Me?
Yes.
So I think currently I am the president of,
No?
yes,
Yes.
yes.
Would you accept a
Oh, sure.
a motion?
Happy to continue in this role, for sure,
All right.
yes.
I'd like to make a motion to elect Mayor Bain as the president of the EDA for this
I'll
upcoming
second it.
session.
Well, maybe just 2 seconds.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor signal by saying aye.
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 Oppose? And motion carries. Go ahead.
Your service.
Thank you. Thoughts on vice president and treasurer? I think my preference would be that we put these two together, both vice president and treasurer together. And Abby, tell me that's not anything in conflict, right?
I don't believe so. I think the only conflict would be a president, vice president, but I think the treasurer and vice president could be the same.
Okay. I would like to see those together, and I would like to nominate Councilmember Husnick for that role.
I would second that motion if he'd accept that, both of
Motion.
I'll
those.
accept, yes, thank you.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Abstain.
Oppose? One abstention.
Abstain. Yep.
Thank you for your service.
Thank you, Sam. We have, okay, so we have filled the roles of president, vice president, and treasurer. We have secretary and assistant treasurer are the two positions that are open, is that correct?
And
That is
assistant treasurer.
And, oh, I'm sorry, secretary and assistant treasurer are open. I would nominate Abby for those positions.
I would second that motion.
Is there a second?
You didn't give me an option.
You're
Second.
supposed to abstain. no?
Just think what would happen if you weren't here.
Would you
Yeah, that's right, that's right.
I would happily serve this commission in that way.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signal by saying aye.
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 Oppose? And motion carries.
Thank you for your service.
Thank you, Abby. Okay, our next item this evening is to approve our minutes from our regular meeting of April 8th, 2024. Is there a motion or any changes to those minutes?
I make a motion that we approve the minutes from the, see,
April 8th.
which one were we at here? March 11th, 2024?
April,
Oh,
is it
April.
April 8th?
Yeah, April 8th.
We have a
need it
motion
on
for
there
the April 8th minutes,
I'll second that.
and we have a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Oppose? And motion carries. Our next item this evening is consideration of our 2020, an update on our 2024 budget and consideration for our 2025 budget. And Abby.
Thank you. As I noted in a staff memo to the EDA, activities for the EDA are funded out of a City Fund 212. This is separate from the city's general fund. Means revenues coming are for an EDA-specific levy that, if not spent by the EDA, stay within the EDA fund. So in other words, if you don't spend all your money this year, it kind of rolls over and you kind of put it in your savings account That being said, if you spend more than your money, that's gonna come out of your savings account. So at the end of 2023, your fund balance was $263,802. The EDA's budget for 2024 was $164,147,000. Year-to-date expenses were about 28% used. That's pretty common, those program funds, that $50,000 that's sitting in the program fund category. We haven't spent any of that money this year. That's pretty much reserved for that commercial incentive improvement program. As a reminder, that's that exterior facade program that the city expanded last year. The forgivable loan program, we couldn't call it a grant anymore. So the city council's requested the EDA's budget for 2025. Staff did draft a proposed expenditures for 2025, that would total $203,989. Other than wages, staff's not recommending any increase in funding for operations, contracted services, planning, program management. The increase has to do with proposal of a planning manager to the community development department. So that would be a position underneath my position that would help manage current planning activities, help with some economic development functions, as well as some of the airport functions. The position would, my position is funded 50% from the EDA, 50% from the general fund. This position would be 75% focused on planning, zoning, 25% economic development fund. So I have the breakout, oops, I guess you didn't see that anyways. The breakout is on that page 2 of my staff report, page 11 of the packet, which shows that we would be holding our operations, contracted services, planning, and program funds. Which does represent a 24% increase. Staff recommends the EDA review the proposed expenditures for 2025 and if favorable, move to submit the EDA's proposed budget to the City Council and requesting a 24.27% EDA levy increase to accommodate the proposed expenses.
Thank you, Abby. Members of the EDA, comments, questions? We're just beginning our budget cycle, so now is a great time to just do a completeness check, talk about, is both what's been proposed and also items that you would like to see that maybe aren't proposed. Just good opportunity for some general discussion. Any thoughts?
I have one, and I know it's never popular with the public. However, I've long advocated that board member wages be much higher than they are. And I'm not going to vote against the proposal tonight because I understand that this happens in a different time set by City Council, but I have long advocated that those in our community that might be a single parent that have to incur daycare expenses or those types of things are less likely to participate on our boards and commissions as a result of relatively low wages. And so I would urge that the council look at our comparative cities when they set those things in the future. I personally am happy to serve at the wages that I have, but I think that having a diversity of opinion is strong on all boards and commissions, and I think that our wages prohibit some in our community from doing that.
It's a good perspective and a conversation point we haven't had for a while, so thank you for bringing that up. Thoughts on either that additional item or any other items you would see on the budget proposal?
I've just got a quick question. Where would, like funding, we talked about getting a booth for shows, for like Chris saying to go to and EDA. Is that in somewhere in here?
Is it the purchase of the booth or is it more of like the registration?
Both.
And both?
I would have to look. I think that we did anticipate doing some marketing and development for Headwaters 123 in 2025. So it could be a part of those, it could be a part of what I've lumped as planning dollars for the $22,500, but it would likely be an operations line item. I have not looked at what the actual expense would be for a city booth to know exactly how much that cost would be. But I do believe we could shift our planning dollars around some to be able to accommodate that.
Okay, I was just looking under the 2025 draft expenditures. So it's
Yep.
not in any category in there.
It's not in any category. I'd have to go back. I don't recall necessarily us indicating that that was necessarily as much of a priority next year.
Alrighty.
Abby, can you, we have 22,500 listed on 2025 for professional services.
Yep.
Can you remind me, what is that?
Sure. So this year, those funds are going for the shoreline study we looked at, and then also for a match that we might need for the Southwest area study. Next year in 2025, we are looking at the local affordable housing program. If we end up moving forward with some program parameters, we might need some consulting funds to help us with that, as well as the Headwaters 123. So we do have kind of some consensus building, some RFP, some of that potential marketing. But those dollars were really used to help hire consultants to help kind of do some of that long-range work typically.
Is there any balance left to pay the outfit that was doing the downtown planning?
Yes, have already paid them for any services rendered to date.
So nothing is allotted in here?
Nope,
We're done.
nothing more would carry into 2025 unless the future kind of that downtown, we talk about the shoreline study and maybe moving forward with some improvements in that area, the downtown boat launch. If there's further planning needs there, that might come up as part of late 24, early 25 operations. But as of right now, we don't have any anticipated needs for the downtown area.
What would that come under on here?
Underneath that planning, if it was planning studies, true development, we'd be looking at potentially, if it's an EDA project, potentially using the reserves, but certainly seeking outside funding assistance if there was a capital project.
And then just a reminder, make sure I have this straight. So the new position that's proposed, it would be 50% EDA and 50% general fund?
Nope, my position's 50% EDA, 50% general fund. The new position would be 25%
thank you.
EDA, 25% airport fund, and 50% general fund.
Okay. Council, any other points of feedback? Thoughts? What makes me, I feel like the EDA could use some, I don't know, workshop session or next step session, just to revisit downtown plan, where we are with the shoreline study, and just to do a gut check on what our next projects are related to the downtown plan, before we get too far into budget finalization. I'm not sure we have anything that's like burning right now that's top of mind, which is why we're sitting here not having this conversation. But also, I would hate for us to get later into the year or early next year and somebody wants to revisit that list and we don't have anything budgeted. And so I think just but you know, the shoreline study kind of, we received those results, we have those results, but we haven't really identified our next item. And so having some more conversation around what that might be, and then just having consensus on timing of what that either is or is not, I think would just be helpful before we get too far into budget. Because again, if anything were to come up, it would have to fit in what's already budgeted. And I just want to, I think we would all benefit from just being certain of what that more near-term strategy might look like.
Sure. I will happily prepare something for the July meeting that will be after staff is being asked and the EDA is being asked to submit the budgets. A couple things I will just note. So a lot of the work the EDA has done to date has been the planning, right? You've been planning for downtown development. And in that downtown plan, you kind of call for, well, then let's do X, Y, Z capital things. So one project that staff is looking into at the direction of the council is some of the beautification and landscaping along Broadway and the roundabout with Lake Avenue. So that is it's a project that's directly coming out of the downtown plan, but it's kind of spinning from the EDA now into that construction world. So we're really looking at the EDA kind of teeing these up for then the city to kind of maybe help fund the actual work being done. Additionally, by that time of our next meeting, or shortly right around our next meeting, we'll be meeting with the DNR to talk about the downtown launch. So that'll also be a good time that we can kind of start to look, are there further studies needed to be able to evaluate what are our options or what do we want to keep doing moving forward there. Happily put all that in something in the July packet to kind of say, okay, here's your downtown plan, let's review it, here's some things we have done, here's some things other groups are doing, right? Because the EDA isn't the only body that's kind of taking that and keeping it moving forward. But yes, I certainly can provide that.
Any other requests or items that would be helpful to see? All right. Thank you, Abby. And if there's no further discussion on this, we can move on to our next agenda item, which is to consider the local affordable housing aid and a discussion on that topic.
Can I just ask one point of clarification, President Bain, members of the commission? Generally, is the commission in support of this, or would you like further information at that next meeting about potential alterations to the budget?
That's generally supportive, or?
I'd like a little more information, but I'm just one.
And I think, Abby, if we can, I think July 8th would be kind of our drop dead date to get stuff together, so I think there's still time for one more meeting. If you want to not make a motion on this tonight, but we, just so you're kind of teed up for our budget process, we will need that recommendation from you July 8th.
At your next meeting. Thank you.
And so we're okay not to take action tonight?
You are, unless this commission is ready to take action tonight.
I just,
More information.
specific to the downtown plan? Yeah, okay. Is there anything else we want more information on before we would take any action? Not hearing anything. And so, and back to, with some information, I think what Abby's looking for is just a little indication of, are we favorable with the, pending this conversation around the downtown, or are there points of concern? Anybody have some opinions you're willing to express?
I think we're favorable, but would just like a little more information on that, just to tighten it up.
I'm comfortable with supporting it tonight if desired, but I'm perfectly okay with more information coming if it helps other commissioners get to that point.
I'm comfortable supporting tonight. I do think, though, we should have at least the conversation and kind of the gut check on where we are with downtown, just again, because we are providing the funding for those projects. And so I think it's kind of my completeness check. Is what's in the budget complete? And that would, I think, give some confirmation of that. Commissioner or Member Hoyt, we were just talking about the 2024 budget and wanted to give you an opportunity, if you had anything from your packet review that you wanted to mention. We are leaning on not taking action tonight, and in our July meeting, getting some information about kind of just where we are with the downtown plan and talking about what may happen next with the downtown plan, because we don't have a lot of specific new project dollars budgeted in 2024. And I had suggested we take that action just to do a gut check and just make sure that there's nothing out there in the near term that we wanted to fund. So that's kind of where we are so far. Any other points of feedback? We were just getting ready to transition to our next topic, and so don't want to move on if you have some other feedback you'd like.
Fine.
Okay. Okay, with that, we can move to discussion on the local affordable housing aid.
Thank you, President Bay and members of the commission. In 2023, the state of Minnesota created a framework to provide new sales tax revenue, local affordable housing aid to Forest Lake, assist many local governments, but specifically Forest Lake will be receiving a considerable amount of money for affordable housing in perpetuity as long as this tax exists. Preliminary estimates for the fiscal year 2024, which will receive our first disbursement next month, so it comes in 2 disbursements a year, is a little over $210,000, but as you see in the staff report, by 2027, it's anticipated that could be up close to $350,000. These are per year dollars that would come. We have 3 years to spend the money after it has been dispersed to the city, or if not, to transfer it to a local housing trust fund. If we don't use it or transfer it, we have to return it to the state of Minnesota. So as we prepare to receive our first semi-annual payment in July, I'm bringing this before the EDA and subsequently will go before the Planning Commission prior to talking with the City Council. But what are our thoughts in using those funds? We will need to develop some parameters around the use of those funds. Who's going to disperse those funds? How do they review requests? And so this is just one is kind of provided as an FYI, but 2, to see what is maybe some of the EDA's preliminary thoughts on the use of these affordable housing dollars. So I do note the different types of aid, or what the aid may be used for. One is emergency rental assistance. So there are some income restrictions. Really the use is to provide direct assistance for emergency rental housing. Some considerations, these types of funding requests usually go through county or other nonprofit programs. It's not as common for municipal jurisdictions or local governments to have programs of this nature. Another use for funds would be new construction or redevelop. Again, income restrictions. The income restrictions you see here for both of these and the next one where you see the 80% area median income, but the priority is for those that are less than 50% of the area median income. That new construction redevelopment would be to partner with or provide direct support for developers, for construction, acquisition, financing. These are for buildings for 4 or more units. There are some requirements for ADA compliant units and sensory accessible units. Those requirements are also applicable for rental rehabilitation. Those can be for multifamily loans, grants for rehab, energy and water rebates. Both of these, or that program may be an opportunity to assist in the rehabilitation of aging rental stock within the community. That has been identified, I think, if maybe not in some of our plans, but in many of conversations I've had with other members of the community. Some of you, at some of our rental housing is becoming a little more aged. And then rehabilitation of owner-occupied housing. This is loans or grants for rehabilitation, exterior improvements, energy and water rebates. So this one is interesting in that it would provide funding for up to 115% of the area median income. And that's an area above the 80% that has very low, if not no, funding sources currently. So in other words, there's little to no funding programs for that above 80% AMI, certainly not over the 100% AMI. And staff does see this as an opportunity for residents who would traditionally exceed income existing income requirements. I note in the comprehensive plan, we have a few different goals. One is to improve and maintain existing housing units, and we would consider activities aimed at rehabilitation or acquisition of properties for maintenance purposes, and increase availability of new affordable housing. And that would be where this city's HRA or the EDA to be active in supporting new affordable housing opportunities and development programs. Part of the reason that this is coming before you is by state law, an EDA may be an HRA. We're still looking through some of our documents to see if we've actually taken on that official designation. We may have to take some action for the EDA to become the HRA. These are things that we'll keep looking at as we further expand. But also, the housing implementation plan of the comprehensive plan indicates that we would maintain existing housing units, develop new affordable housing units, and preserve existing affordable housing units. So all of the program funds really go to help support all of our housing goals. So staff is bringing this to the EDA tonight to just mention that the funding that's out there allows for us to disperse the funds, but it doesn't allow us to use the funds for program administration. So in other words, we get money, yay, but we don't get money to help with staffing needs or program development, anything of that nature. So staff does have some concern as we look at how we use these funds, that we're not necessarily creating programs that's just adding to the work, already demanding workload in our community. We don't currently have any housing assistance programs administered by the city. So that being said, staff is necessarily asking or mentioning that there is merit in creating a housing trust fund as a place to put the funds, a dedicated spot that will hold them until we develop some parameters for which the city would like to disperse the funding. The EDA should review the material and just discuss whether or not there's any sort of priority areas the city should focus on as it explores the use of local affordable housing. Just going back to that table again of saying rental assistance, new construction or redevelopment, and then rehabilitation of rentals, rehabilitation of owner occupied. Certainly can move forward with exploring all of these options and bringing something back, but wanted to know if there was any kind of first blush gut check on the EDA of areas we should really hone in more on.
And Abby, have we closed the door on partnering with the county? Do we know for sure? So
We-
initially when this came out, the county staff runs these programs and there was a lot of talk about cities creating partnerships with them to do that. But that was before the state took away our administrative funding.
We have not. The county early on had said that they're more than welcome, we're more than welcome to give the funding to them, and they would disperse it within the community on our behalf. At this time, if there isn't, we don't have confirmation from the county that they have the staffing to do that, if there's no funding for administration. We're gonna continue to explore that partnership as well as any other partnership possible that we could utilize these funds in a way that doesn't impact our overall operations, our general fund, your operating fund, those sorts of things.
Yeah. Comments? Member Lynn, yes.
Abby, do you know what the AMI is here?
I would have to look. It's really, I have documentation. I was going to include it in here.
Rough guess? No?
What makes it kind of tricky is that we'll have the AMI from like 2018, 2019, right before we adopted the 2040 comprehensive plan. But that AMI has increased pretty substantially in the metro region since that time, and I've had trouble trying to find the estimated or what we consider our current AMI for Forest Lake, or if it is just a metro AMI. So short answer, no, I don't have that information for you, but I am looking into it.
And then I know that this is a new legislative piece that came on board. Are you aware if there was a pilot prior to this legislation with any other city or county that had these options?
I am not. There are, I mean, other cities and counties administer housing funds, affordable housing funds, have well-established programs in place. So anything that we would potentially create, we'd be using probably some of the same requirements or parameters. I think one of the things that we're really wanting to do, staff's really wanting to do, is let's create a safe space for the money, and we have 3 years. Let's keep learning more about the program funds, the use, and what partners are out there that can help us use these funds locally in our community, but that doesn't necessarily put a significant strain or a burden on the existing staffing resources.
I would encourage us to have that partnership. I'm a little, if you just think about having to start these programs from scratch and from the beginning, and just looking at even just the underwriting that would be required to get to confirm income restrictions, you're getting to a level of administration and a level of underwriting that we just don't do in this type of area. We're very adept in building and, you know, reviewing plans, but we're talking about a human service that we just typically don't provide, and so we don't have any of that foundation on collecting that type of information and then translating that information into a decision. So us starting from scratch is certainly an option, but also seems rather inefficient if we have other communities that find themselves in the same place. And so if there are networks or I think about, you know, joint boards or any sort of a group of cities that might come together to have common administration of these funds so that the funds can be individually invested in each community just seems to make a lot of sense. Since if that continues to be the state's position that the funds themselves cannot be used for any sort of administration, I love that we have the access to the funds, and we can certainly have a lot of conversation about what they should be used for. But any of that is going to require, I think, a fair amount of just foundation building, that if we don't have to build that foundation, and if we can partner with somebody that can do that, that I think is
I would
smart.
agree, that sounds like an entire department we need.
Right.
A lot of stress on the staff.
Oh, yeah. We
And
it's like a department with 3 people in it.
I mean,
I do believe the CDA will be asking the Washington County Board to increase their levy to cover the staffing for this. That last year, they could use, was it up to 10% for administration? So it's only been since this legislative session that they made that change, that you couldn't use it for administration. So that's why last year there was a lot of talk amongst some of the cities in the county of you know, getting together an MOU of understanding of
yes.
how our money would be used if we gave it to the county. And I think they're just trying to figure out if there's support there at the Washington County Board to fund those through a county tax levy, and then we could explore that partnership.
I think we'll continue to, I mean, as the time goes on in your work plan, you've seen this is in your work plan because you'll likely have a role. The state says you can be an HRA. I think if I remember right, it might even be a year before we kind of have a little bit more parameters in place or partnerships that we've explored. I think tonight I just was kind of curious more than anything. The comp plan and our housing goals say that we're gonna preserve affordable housing and we're gonna bind or help fund new affordable housing. We don't have necessarily housing goals related to rental assistance. Would you like us to continue to look for options for partners in rental assistance, or focus on that rehabilitation and the new construction exclusively to meet those goals?
I'm sorry. Was this something that you could accept or decline?
We are just gonna get it, and if we don't use it, we give it back in 3 years.
Okay, what I
And so you
I
give it
don't
back to the state.
understand is,
So, sorry, so I think there's an important distinction here about why we should really push for a partnership with the county. Is if we don't use it in 3 years, it goes to the state, but if nothing else, shouldn't we have a partnership so it goes to the county and it stays within Washington County rather than going back to the state and being spent anywhere else. At least that keeps it regional. If nothing else, that's something to think of as we go through this discussion.
What I don't get is, the state is giving us this money, and they're not allowing any of it to be used for administration, but there's gotta be a lot of administration and rules, regulations. There's gotta be a change in the city budget then to allow for that, and you're getting 209 in, and what are you gonna pay out, 75,000 to have a full-time administrator for this? It diminishes what you're getting.
We,
See what I'm saying?
yes, and that's where staff has not been of the opinion that we would be asking the city council for funding for a new position to administer the funds. As Christina had mentioned, as of last year, 10% of the housing fund, so you think 210,000, would have only been 20,000 that could have been used for administration. That still probably wouldn't have been enough to support a program. What I'm saying is that I think that there's merit in continuing to explore options for partnerships, that we could give our funds to another agency or nonprofit that could help us achieve our goals, but not actually require us to administer the programs or use our existing or future staffing to use those funds.
So you're looking for something already in existence, excuse the
Mhm.
simple questions.
Yeah.
Just trying to
Yeah.
grab hold of this. So some entity might be out there that's administrating this type of funds already, and it's okay with the state that Forest Lake puts their funds in their care, and they make the decisions about who in Forest Lake gets that money?
Well, what it would be is the determination of funding. It would be some agreement. So let's just say you're a nonprofit partner or the county. You have a program that already has parameters. If we agree, that's where we'd want to put our funding. We would have an agreement with that organization that potentially we may weigh in on those applications. But if those applicants meet the city's parameters, if we've said we want to only provide 50% of any project 1 million or greater, you name it, then essentially the agreement that we have can be as specific as that, or it can be just as specific as we give it to you and you have to put it back into our community.
Okay, so we can come up with guidelines for the city of Forest Lake, and we hand it over to this entity to administer. Is
We
that
could,
what
we
you're saying?
could, yes, we could. I think right now it's, what are all the coulds? What are the agencies and organizations and programs out there that we may want to invest in that could do this on our behalf?
And then they will charge the city to administer this, but those funds cannot come out of this 209, is that correct?
They may, we don't know at this time. So some nonprofit organizations may be using their own budget dollars for disbursement to an applicant, whereas if they can use our dollars to disperse and then take those disbursement dollars and use those for their staffing, that might help offset their budgetary constraints. But I don't know right now exactly any of that, because we really haven't started to explore this whatsoever. More than anything right now, I think the one thing that I'm bringing this to the EDA and the Planning Commission and the council is this money is gonna come in. We would like to have a safe place to put it. We put it in a housing trust fund. The state has said you've substantially spent it. And then I think we take some time to really explore what are those potential partners? What are those potential programs? What are the pros and cons? What are the budgetary potential impacts to the city? To really start to look at how do we use those funds? Not a 24 thing, and quite likely probably not even a 25 thing, I wouldn't imagine.
Okay, thank you.
It sounds to me, though, that even if they go to another entity, that we're gonna be really involved with it and have a certain amount of responsibility on how they are distributed. Is that a true statement, or?
I mean, we have responsibility in how those funds would be distributed, because
So-
ultimately they're funding to us.
So
Yeah.
either way, there's gonna be some administrative costs, no matter what they're.
Might be some, certainly at the onset of development of agreements with these entities, right? I don't think the city is
That's
just gonna
take a
hand
lot
over
more exploration, I think.
any dollars before we would really know that those dollars were meeting the intent of the program goals, going to the needs of our community. So yes, there might be some administrative costs, but not necessarily in administering the program, but setting up the use of the funds for success.
And again, I think it
Interesting.
depends on what group it goes to, right? If it's as simple as you give it to Washington County for programs they already run, and you have an agreement that says, we just want you to use Forest Lake's dollars in Forest Lake, there's probably not a lot of ongoing administration. I'm not sure what other, groups and nonprofits Abby's thinking of, those might require more if it's not something that they're used to working with as funds. Washington County's getting their own set of funds to do this, so they're gonna know all the program requirements, they're just, would potentially be getting more money from the city. But again, the biggest question there is the county gonna be willing to take on our extra role without the funding for staffing, so.
As to the question, kind of on, yeah, Abby, you said the whats, right? So what would we be interested of? There's, I think, four categories that are allowed for. I'd be interested in feedback of prioritization of those four categories. Thoughts of, assuming we're able to solve for the administration, and we've kind of leapt over that hurdle. I get that that's a big hurdle, but if that is the case, what would some preferences, or what would be thoughts as to those priorities? Anyone have any thoughts?
I have some.
Yeah, go ahead.
So if we can somehow figure out how to avoid administrative costs, and I suspect that the easiest way is with the county, I would personally trust them first, and then I would lean towards potential nonprofit partners. If you can't get past the administrative cost, my next thought really is send the money back to the state. And because the amount of money here, when you break it down, isn't going to,
It's not a big impact.
the amount of work that our staff would have to put in, I don't know that the benefit to our community is truly gained on that. How many affordable houses can you create with $200,000 in a year is extremely minimal when we look at how other governments have created affordable housing. That's, in a lot of communities, not even one residential facility, one unit.
And remember,
so-
you don't have to spend the money all in 1 year, so you could take 3, 5 years, and then you could have a substantial amount to put towards
Yes.
a new development, yeah.
And so I was going to say the next step for me is I'm very okay with creating the trust fund and putting the money in there. Should a developer or something come along over time that comes to fruition if we can't get past that administrative cost. But I'd be very hesitant on pushing staff or other budgets to realign to really meet this goal. I personally think it's a really ill thought out way to do affordable housing from the state legislature.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't be surprised if at some point in the future, when legislative swings happen, that this got pulled out, or when budget constraints happen, that even the party that put it in place pulls it out themselves. And so I would very much caution any future spending of money that's allocated yet not received in that fund.
I have to echo Member Langness's concerns. I mean, especially, I just have to say it, right? Like, this is literally the week of the verdict on the Feeding Our Future trial, right? And so I'm just nervous that anytime you've got grant money that isn't associated with strong administration, you're just opening up for a whole host of bad things to happen. And so we need to have strong administration of whatever's going to happen. It's just unfortunate that that's not funded, that's not paid for. As it relates specifically to the program areas, one thing that does stand out at me is rehabilitation of owner-occupied programs. Seems like it's an area that may slip through the cracks. There are other areas in our community that do emergency rental assistance. We have some things already in place around promotion of new construction or redevelopment. I always think a lot of our affordable housing is actually, most affordable housing is actually sitting in our older community, the older neighborhoods, and there isn't anything to help with that bathroom remodel or new windows or some of the things that make those homes more habitable and extend their life. And also, if that's the category that has the higher AMI and it's kind of that bubble that doesn't get other assistance, as long, again, as we're able to have strong administration, that is an area where there's probably a fair amount of unmet need, and you could do those projects in smaller increments that you actually see some real benefit. I'd hate to give money back and to just not have it come somewhere within our community, but again, the administration has to be strong, so we have to solve for that. Other thoughts around those priorities or feedback on this thought on,
No.
rehabilitation of owner-occupied?
Any kind of remodeling project, it'll eat up a lot of money in a hurry.
It does.
And so far, how thin can you make this? And in the meantime, you got a bunch of costs involved. It's gonna be a tough decision. It's gonna take a lot more talk about it, no question about it.
That was gonna be my comment, if you got 200,000 and a remodel for a bathroom or
Yeah.
updating, you're talking 20,000, you're doing 10 houses a year.
I know.
How are you gonna pick 10 people? You're gonna have hundreds of applicants and you're only gonna
Thousands.
use 10, is that fair?
That is a fair statement.
That
I
is,
mean, it's-
right.
Yeah.
It'd be interesting to see, like, are other communities doing a lottery system, or like how do you, because the demand is going to very much outpace what is available, and I don't know.
I'm just gonna throw out a comment about the rental assistance. Rents in Forest Lake are the highest point they've ever been. And the problem is the people in those rentals are potential first-time home buyers, but they've spent so much money on their rent, they don't qualify to move up. So they're stuck in this loop. And maybe that isn't the best choice, but it certainly would help a lot of people. Because rents are, I can't believe what rents are. I mean, they had, husband and wife or a couple, whatever it is. One salary goes strictly to rent. And those are our next first-time home buyers, right? And then 7 or 8 years later, they move up again to the next bracket. But we don't have that because they don't have any money.
Right.
They're all going to rent. But
So this is great. I appreciate the dialogue and the comments. I think as I keep moving forward, as we keep moving forward, as we talk with the county, I'll bring this back, even though on your work plan, I think we kind of kicked it out maybe even another year before that next disbursement. The idea would be within this next year, we'll keep having these conversations and trying to kind of hone in on figuring out what kind of partners are out there to help us potentially use these funds. I'm not afraid of letting those funds sit, and I'm also not afraid of sending them back because we don't have the resources to use them. Do I want that to occur? No, I would really love that we utilize these dollars to meet some of the unmet needs in the community. But this is the first step. It's just starting the dialogue, and so I appreciate it. I'll share your comments with both the Planning Commission and the council, and I'll keep you posted. It might be, maybe even it's one of those things that kind of quarterly we revisit what staff has been doing in that time period to kind of keep that conversation going and what we're learning and stuff, so.
Any other thoughts or points of feedback? All right. Let's move on to our next agenda item, which is consideration of the 2024 work plan. Review of the 2024 work plan.
Yeah, it's just an update. It was more provided as an FYI in your packet. We developed the work plan. It was March, so it was a little late in the kind of first quarter when we adopted the work plan. But commissioners requested just reviewing this, so I'm kind of putting it on quarterly, that at the end of each quarter, I'll bring it back before you to kind of give you an update of where we're at on certain things. So draft business subsidy policy, we've had that draft for a while. The EDA and city council did recommend making minor amendments. Our city attorney, though, has said that we do need to do a little bit more to strengthen the policy. So we've been in discussions with the city attorney, but no amendments have been made on that. The Southwest Area Study, the grant scope of work is being refined with the city engineer. I should have something more for you at your next meeting on the submittal of that grant. And then the shoreline study was released to the city council. The council accepted its findings. And then we do have set up, I mentioned, a meeting with the DNR to talk about that study, to talk about the two primary options, keeping it in place or moving it. If the launch is kept in place, it will need some work. And so that's kind of the start of the conversations with the DNR about their favorability to helping fund something about a launch in downtown Forest Lake in the relatively near future. I did mention the additional items. Housing was an agenda topic at your meeting. Headwaters 123 was not an agenda topic item, but I did have just an FYI that we did receive a request for information from Deed for a potential development site or business looking to relocate somewhere within Minnesota, and they're looking for people communities that have public land. So these are common. We get them every other month or so. A lot of times the Headwaters 123 site is not eligible. It's just for some reason or another, they want too much land area or they want too little land area. It was Project Maxwell was looking to secure land for a new manufacturing facility, light, medium or moderate industrial, 115 to 135 jobs. They were only looking for 10 to 25 acres, which kind of fit well with that ghost platting we had talked about, but isn't necessarily something we're actively marketing. In the end, staff did not submit for Project Maxwell because we learned that Connexus would not be able to provide the electrical capacity that Project Maxwell needed in the time that they wanted to ramp up their production. That being said, I did reach out to the Vice President of Relations and their new Government Relations Coordinator, Connexus's Government Relations Coordinator, who is setting up a meeting with myself and Chris with the county and Great River Energy to start talking about the ramp up capacity at Headwaters 123. So several of the RFIs that have gone out, we just have not been eligible to submit on because the electrical capacity, though there is quite a bit there, is not what a lot of the higher users, so even like a data center, needs for the site. So I wanted to at least just let you know that we're continuing those conversations on Headwaters 123, but as much as we're trying to market it in certain arenas that might bring us more jobs or help provide more tax base, one of the biggest limitations is the power capacity at the moment.
Is one of the things that struck me about that site that I thought we had marketed was dual power? Was there also power available at that site with Excel? Or is that maybe an aspirational item that isn't near-term available?
I think that there is, and that's where pulling Great River Energy into the conversation as well, I think can help us start those conversations.
Okay.
It's a great thing to remind me to try to get Xcel Energy into the room to see. My understanding is that it's nearby
Right.
for both of them.
Yeah,
But
That was, I
the
thought, one of the
actual
positives.
infrastructure there is not quite there.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
fair.
So we're marketing it as a data center, but we don't have enough power for the data center aren't we trying to sell that?
That is true.
Kind of a problem.
It is.
It's
We're
also
all
kind of a surprise. I thought we were led to believe, especially talking with Chris, that we were ready to go.
That's what I
I
thought.
can't help but also question if the data center of 5 years ago's electrical needs might have been less than the data center of today. I'll put that on as something that we can talk about in the next month or so after I've met with these electrical providers. It could be that I just didn't have the right data right in front of me, but in talking with Connexus, they have said they wouldn't be able to provide the needs for the site.
What's their lead time to provide it?
I don't have that information either. Last year this time, it was like 18 months before 18 to 24 months before we could ramp up.
Wow, that's a lot.
So in talking with Chris, he thinks that having these conversations with our electrical providers now, saying we're turning down RFIs, might start increasing the interest to increase the capacity earlier than, or proactively as opposed to reactively.
Was their water requirements reduced? Something was reduced from them when I was talking to Chris several months ago. And we talked about if a data center comes in, the water for cooling is, you have to ramp up for that. But he said, no, things have changed. So is that's something maybe you should inquire about so we're prepared, knowing, okay, can we supply them with enough water?
Sure. Yep, we weren't, my hope was through the second half of this year to gain more information, as much information as I can about Headwaters 123. We've had conversations about we're marketing for a data center, is that the best thing? I get inquiries pretty consistently from other developers who have interest that doesn't align with that or doesn't align with the non-residential workforce opportunity, tax-based opportunities. And so we have it in the work plan as noted that we would start kind of doing some more consensus building between the EDA and the council in the first half of 2025. But my goal is to kind of keep pulling all that information and data together. And as I get it, I can bring more to you. I will say that since I've been on board and really taken a much more active role in the EDA's operations and helping market Headwaters 123, there are some constraints that I think just haven't been shared with the EDA and the council of whether or not that is being fairly marketed or advertised as it, you know.
Well, I mean, when I first got on the board, we were talking about how this was a data center. Now, if I'm a company that requires a data company, and I realize that I can't build my building, I can, but I can't have power for 2 years, change what we're selling it as.
Yeah, I'd be
It may-
very interested. With this, the EDA's done a lot of, I think we've tried to have, like, identify the barriers, remove the barriers. What's the barrier? And so this hasn't come up as a barrier, and not to say that it doesn't exist, but if it is, then let's certainly identify what our options are. And, I can appreciate sometimes those data center sites in particular it is a long term, it's a long project, right? So from the time of initial RFI to an actual proposal to actual, dirt, that sometimes is a couple years of window. And so if that is what everyone's been operating under, is that it's available, yes, it's not, available for 6 months. And if we're talking about the same thing, that's one thing. But if we're really missing on some basic foundation of utility availability, yeah, we need to know that and need to pivot accordingly if that's what we need to do, or again, whatever that right answer is.
So the last significant RFI that we responded on and were selected as Project Pepper, that was 2017. So most of the data that we've kind of got site-specific is 6 years old. Now granted, we've done like the Excipio study since then, but a lot of that did talk about that ramp-up capacity. I think there's a lot that's changed in the market in terms of supply and demand, in terms of getting a generator, all of that kind of stuff that has affected the current conditions of it. So I'll continue to pull together information. I'm not gonna, we probably won't have a lot of time this year to focus a ton on Headwaters 123, but I certainly can bring some stuff back to you in the next few months, just updating you on where we're currently sitting in those opportunities and constraints category in this 2024 climate.
The other issue with that piece of property is that there's a interceptor line going right down the middle of it.
And we have received word from the Met Council that it would cost, it was like 15 to 20 million to move.
Right, so that's not an option. So we may be having to look at something different than a data center there, so that they can use smaller parcels and, because I believe they can build a street over it, if I'm not mistaken on that. There's a certain width of that, you know, and the thing is really deep too, but that really has been part of the problem there too. And I think we need to talk about that. So it's not just data centers, but we need to explore some other options there. So.
Thank you for the update. And
That's all I have for updates at the moment.
Okay. And that was also on our agenda under city updates. Any other city updates we should talk about?
Not that I have at the moment, no.
Okay. Any questions for Abby? All right. We can move on. Do we have anything from Chris for Washington County?
We don't.
Nanette for the chamber.
Well, hello, thank you, President Bain and Commissioners. We've been busy. I can appreciate your conversation about bylaws. We're in the midst of updating and ours as well, so I know what that process entails. And so we also were talking about treasurer roles and all of that, so I hear you on that. We did just a few weeks ago, well, probably a month ago now, hosted our legislative update breakfast, and so we had invited, for our chamber, we actually serve 3 counties, and so we had invited our senators and House representatives across all 3, and so that was a great success. Jenny, I think you've been pro those kinds of things in the past, and so we had a good turnout, and we're happy to deepen those relationships with those folks that serve us in St. Paul. Along with that, we have also been hosting some significant kinds of ribbon cutting, some of our visits. So whether it's the grand opening of the American Legion, the groundbreaking for Midco, and then just last week, the Truck Alliance big grand opening project as well. So those have been fun and some higher profile kinds of things for the chamber. And then coming forth, we have our annual golf event, which comes up in July, and so that's well on its way. And right alongside of that is the 2nd annual Lake Fest Street Dance. That'll be in the parking lot over at Mallard's, so both of those are well on their way. One thing that is new this year, I'm working with Chris Eng and also the folks at Forest Lake High School Career Launch Program, and we will be hosting a co-business and teacher summit right at the end of the summer, right before school starts. And so we've been doing more and more with Mike and Molly at Career Launch. So those are the things that are highest on our list as far as the area, and gladly answer any questions if you have them.
Very good. Thank you, Nanette. Any questions for Nanette? All right. Any other items to come up this evening? Not hearing any, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Oppose? And we're adjourned. Thank you, everyone.